News. This is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede and welcome to Facing South Florida. In a few weeks, a jury will decide whether Nicholas Cruz should be put to death for killing 14 of his classmates and teachers at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High. During that sentencing hearing, we will hear Cruz's defense team explain how the warning signs in Cruz's behavior were missed and that this tragedy never should have happened. And those attorneys won't be wrong. I'm less interested now in what happens to Nicholas Cruz than I am in making sure that those signs won't be missed in the future. In response to the shooting, the legislature established a requirement that school districts create a threat assessment program to evaluate students whose behavior raises concerns. This week, I spoke to Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, who chairs the MSD Commission, to discuss whether that program is being used properly. Here's a hint, it's not. But I started with a more basic question. Are schools safer today than they were 4 years ago?
Absolutely. There's no question that schools are safer. We're in a much better place today than we were in February of 2018. Improvements have been made, but there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done and a long way to go. Things like having a person on each campus across Florida, there's about 4,000 schools in the state of Florida, they can immediately react to a threat. That's a super important change. That was a seismic shift. Having better infrastructure, having better communication, having drills that are actually done in most places. Again, we're having some issues in some places, but by and large, I think that the drills are at least in place. Now, again, this is where the improvements need to be made, is that the drill system is in place and they're doing them to some degree, but we're finding out now that in some places they're not having the kids move at all to do the drills. Well, that's not a drill. So these are the things that we still have to work on.
Where are we with threat assessments across the state, and are you happy with the way they're being implemented?
We have a framework in place, and no, I'm not happy with how they're being implemented. So let me, say it this way: is that you have to divide this really into two different categories. The first category, which is what we have been primarily working on for the last few years, and that is to stop the threat as soon as it begins, because you have to accept the premise, if you're being really intellectually honest, is that it's going to happen again. The question is when and where, and you have to stop it as soon as it starts. Because what we saw at Stoneman Douglas was 34 kids and adults shot and or killed in 3 minutes and 51 seconds. Cops aren't going to get there fast enough. It is going to happen again. And one is better than 34. So we need to stop it as soon as it starts. And how you do that is by putting things in place so that you can identify the threat, communicate the threat, and immediately react to the threat. That's where the emphasis has been. But that isn't going to prevent it. That is dealing with it after it happens. So put that off to the side, and now we come into the discussion about prevention. The singular most beneficial opportunity to deal with prevention is through threat assessments. And it isn't just threat assessments, and it seems like it's a semantic, maybe to some people it is, but it's really threat management. And what it involves, again, is getting information, analyzing the information, and then managing the threat.
So when we're talking about a threat assessment, what we're talking about are concerns about a potential student at a school, that maybe some questions, maybe something that a teacher observes, a parent observes, a neighbor observes, a complete stranger decides to call in and notify the school about, and then having to analyze that information and assess, is this child a threat to other students and staff at that school? Is that a good characterization of what we're talking about when we're talking about threat assessments?
Yes, it's somebody that hears something, sees something, and then you get a interdisciplinary group together that looks at it, assesses it, and makes a determination as to whether there's merit to it. So in the really simplest terms, it's something has happened, there's an evaluation of what's happened, and a determination as to whether it warrants being addressed. So in the simplest terms, that's what it is. Now, in a little bit more complicated sense, and threat assessments and threat management are not limited to the four corners of the school, is that threat management needs to be done community-wide. But what we're talking about here is the threat management process or threat assessment process as it relates to the schools. Kids don't live at schools. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the bell rings and school's dismissed, those same kids that have been the subject of a threat inquiry, a threat assessment, or threat management in the school, they're going into the community. And so there's got to be interaction, and it has to be intertwined between law enforcement in the community, law enforcement in the schools themselves. Everybody has to look at this in a totality, and that's what's not being done, and it's not being done enough. So
I was going to say, one of the issues is, as I understand it, is let's say that there was a threat assessment done on a student in Palm Beach, and that student and family move for whatever to Miami-Dade or to Broward counties. The material that Palm Beach had, the threat assessment that they may have done on that child in Palm Beach, does not follow the student to Broward or Miami-Dade or to the next school district in the state of Florida that they go to. Is that a problem?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's very hit or miss, because what we don't have statewide is we don't have any statewide database. We don't have any consistent way of documenting the threat assessments, the threat management. You have some districts that are using paper and pen and folders and old school way, and you have some that have automated systems. But even those that have automated systems is that they don't interface. They're not connected in any way. So you could have extensive threat management information by a threat assessment team in one district, and that ends up not getting shared. And even in some districts, and we saw this in Broward, is that there was no central repository. Is that the threat assessment material was kept in each school. So, getting to your question and to your point is that what we saw even in Broward was that if you had a threat assessment at one school like Stoneman Douglas, and the kid transferred to a different high school down in Plantation, is that it wouldn't even move from school to school because it was sitting in a folder on some assistant principal's desk in one school and it never moved. So, and are we, better today? Maybe, maybe not. And it depends upon the school district or school districts. And so we are not where we need to be today as far as threat assessments are concerned. One of the things that the bill that's pending in the legislature will address is making sure that the people who are mandated to be on the threat assessment team actually participate in the decision making. Now, people should hear what I just said and ask themselves, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Isn't that crazy? Yes, Tabo, it is crazy, because what you have is that you have a mandate that there be certain members of these threat assessment teams, a mental health professional, a law enforcement officer, a school administrator, a teacher. You have these certain participants. But what we found is they're not all participating in the threat assessment process. We've had situations where the cops have been called in from the street afterward, given the material and said, here, review it and sign off on it. So, so now we're having to put in law that the required members of the threat assessment team have to participate in the process from beginning to end.
Have you had a chance to sit and talk to either of the new superintendents down in South Florida?
I have in Broward with Superintendent Cartwright, not since she's been named as a permanent superintendent. I hope to get back down there sometime in the next couple of weeks and be able to sit down with her. The new superintendent in Miami-Dade, I believe he just took office in the last week or so. I have not had an opportunity, but I'm going to make an appointment to get down there and meet with him because there has to be, in some cases, new emphasis, and in some cases, a re-emphasis on school safety in some of these districts that either hasn't been there or was there and diminished, and we need to get it back to the right levels. It's not there, and we need to make sure that it is on the A list and the top of the A list as the priorities for these school boards and for these superintendents. They have a lot on their plate. They have a tremendous amount of responsibility. They have a lot to do as far as educating the kids, but there's nothing more important than meeting the parents' expectation that when they send their kids to school in the morning, their kids are coming home safe in the afternoon. There's nothing more important than that, because you can teach all you want, but if the kids and the staff are not safe, then you don't have anything. And that we have to emphasize this. And while we've made progress, we are not there.
One issue that emerged following Parkland was the use of the Promise program, a program designed to keep kids out of the criminal justice system for minor one-time offenses. We learned this program was abused under the previous superintendent, Robert Runcie, who deceived the public about its success. There was talk that the legislature would ban such programs in the future. I asked Sheriff Gualtieri about where that stands.
As far as the Promise program is concerned, this is another thing that the bill does that it's going to pass, I believe, both chambers and will become law, is it requires the Office of Safe Schools within the Department of Education to do a inventory, if you will, of all of the pre-arrest diversion programs like the Promise program that exists in the schools, and to make sure that all those programs are complying with Florida law. There's been problems because they don't comply. They just do their own thing. Like the Promise program was doing its own thing, and data wasn't being shared, and it wasn't being run consistently with the community-based diversion programs. There was no interaction. So you had these kids that were getting 4, 5, 6 bites at the apple because they're getting all these diversions in school when they commit thefts, they commit batteries, they vandalize stuff or whatever it is. And then they're going out in the community and they're doing the exact same thing. And they're getting these breaks all over the place. And they're getting multiple breaks when they shouldn't. So this is why it has to be done consistently. So
you're not opposed, though, to diversion programs in some form, correct?
Oh, I'm a huge supporter of it. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, our agency, leads the state in diversion. We have a 96% first-time juvenile participation in diversion. So we're a leader in the state in that. I wholeheartedly support and endorse diversion, but I wholeheartedly support and endorse it when good decisions are made. Kids make mistakes. We don't always need to hammer a kid. Sometimes kids just are silly and they make stupid mistakes. And it needs to be recognized as that and it needs to be dealt with accordingly. But when you get a kid that is 5 or 6 times and they're getting multiple bites at it, that's not a mistake anymore. Now you got a problem and it needs to be dealt with. But when you have school districts that are operating on these islands and there's no communication with others, and they're not, as the law requires, entering that information into the Department of Juvenile Justice's system for this so it can be tracked, because they just refuse to enter it, that's a problem. And so that's what was happening in Broward, is that they were just refusing to enter it. So they had this island program. They had a sweeping program that allowed multiple participations. And then you got a kid that's getting these multiple participations in the Broward School District program. And then they're going to the mall in Plantation. They're going to the mall in Fort Lauderdale. They're going out on the bus stop and vandalizing. They're stealing this and stealing that. And before you know it, you got this kid that there should be consequences for, because this kid's on a bad path, not just a simple mistake, not just a kid that did something silly, but a kid that's actually become a bad kid and doing bad things, that all they're getting is all these diversions. That's not what it's designed for or what should happen.